Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. Looks like there's a bunch of questions across all the different platforms, so let's head over to Floatplane and get started. busterd just found a Famicom 3D system for a good price and would like to make it a bit more adjustable. Maybe make the lenses closer to my eyes to reduce the tunnel vision. It looks like you could just unscrew the part that connects the strap to the lenses, so one would think a 3D printed part could be doable. I see your site has linked to a Famicom World thread about someone making their own adapter, but doesn't look like it's got any new posts since 2013, and the original poster hasn't posted in it since 2010. So anybody that follows the channel knows how annoying I am about how much I like all of the older 3D games. Some of them I like just because it's fun to put on 3D glasses and go, wow, this stinks. You know, I can't believe they thought this was a good idea. And others are like cool novelties like Space Harrier. I thought that was neat. But there are some that are really good. And in fact, there's a Space Harrier clone on the Famicom 3D system. So I've always hoped that people put more effort into preserving that. There were a bunch of 3D glasses that are much thinner and lighter that have the same 3.5mm adapter on them that were compatible, and they were on eBay for years for $15 each. And I think the seller got tired of selling them and listed their whole box for a couple $100, and I didn't have the room for it. So ever since they sold out, I haven't been able to find them. And that would have normally been what I suggested you do, is just leave the 3D system glasses themselves the way they are. Just, you know, leave them in the box like I do and just, hey, look, a neat piece of history. And then get these other ones that work better. They're, you know, the actual glass that you look through is a little bit larger as well. So overall, it's just a better experience. But I don't know if you could find those anymore, and I don't know if anybody's making them. Also, somebody talked about a project that would plug into the 3.5mm socket of both the NES and SMS ones, and allow you to sync up with the newer style ones that were for like plasma TVs, because it's the same active shutter technology, but now they're big glasses, they're rechargeable, everything about it would be better. And that could have both been its own adapter or just plug it in. That project fizzled out too, because I don't think there was that many people that would be into it. And now with the Mister being able to do all this stuff, that might be another thing to revisit. So as far as rebuilding the original glasses, you could try, but you know, it's just my opinion. This certainly isn't the right way, but I wouldn't want to mess with any original stuff like that. Your idea of just having a different part that would make the lenses closer to your eyes, like that's not cutting the plastic or anything, so that's probably a cool idea. But I still think overall finding a better glasses solution would probably be the best, just the best solution for it, because you know, I really hope somebody steps back up and finishes, or I guess even starts that project where you could use the modern active shutter glasses, just because it's so much different in quality as far as like the weight of the glasses, the size of the glass in front of you. I'm sure the shutter themselves are probably fine and probably the same as the other one, but for my personal opinion, I'd rather see better glasses or a better way to sync newer glasses up to it than mess with the older ones. So other than that, though, there hasn't been much progress on any of the 3D stuff, but I'll keep everybody posted. Over on YouTube now, Brian wants to connect a Dreamcast to an LCD TV. They're intending to buy a retro access SCART cable with a 15 kHz, 31 kHz switch in order to have a single cable connected to their OSSC. And for anybody who's not aware, you need that switch because the Dreamcast has to physically be put into either 480p mode or 15 kilohertz, which is 240p and 480i. And some games require that you either do the switch trick to force it into 480p or that you only run it in 480i. Or of course, there's a few 240p games that might benefit from that mode. But anyway, more info on that, just check out my Dreamcast videos. But continuing with Brian's question, is there any benefit to having a separate VGA or RGB HV cable versus a high-quality sync combining SCART cable, or can I expect the same or the quality to be the same? In your setup, there would be zero difference, and in fact, as far as quality goes, there would mostly be zero difference, assuming you're always using quality cables. You know, if you buy a low-quality unshielded VGA cable, it might not look as good as that SCART cable, but assuming all cables are shielded and well-made, zero quality difference. The only advantage you would have is if you also had a VGA monitor that you wanted to connect it to, and it doesn't sound like that's the case. So no, be confident that that's an excellent setup. And these days, as long as you get good quality cables, once again, the only thing you really have to worry about is what signal your target device is expecting. So, VGA monitor, just get a VGA cable. If you have a 15 kilohertz only monitor, I'd still get the cable that you recommended or the one from Retro Gaming Cables, because you never know, maybe you'll upgrade in the future. And of course, the HD Retrovision ones will come out sometime between now and never, and those would be good for people that are looking for component video as their target signal. But nope, you nailed it. Great solution overall. Krebstar recently acquired a Sony PVM-20M2, the MDU model, which is the standard, awesome, but the standard RGB monitor that you might find in many different places. And with the brightness turned all the way down and the contrast at variable places, it's still pretty bright. They tried 75 ohm terminators, but that model doesn't need it. With the brightness turned all the way down, it's actually almost perfect, but I'm afraid it's just going to keep getting brighter. Any idea what could be wrong? I've tried with several consoles with different outputs and a VCR. Which, if you tried with a VCR, that means you probably also tried composite video versus RGB, which is exactly was going to be my next question. So there's got to be something wrong with the monitor. And my only question is this one of these things that if it's wrong, but like no harm is done, it's just going to be a little brighter until you fix it? Or is this one of these scenarios where the brightness is just a symptom of some other thing, and the more you use it, the more that other thing is causing harm to the rest of the monitor? And I have no idea. I've never run into this scenario before in any of my monitors. So I would contact Retro Tech. He's got a Patreon as well, and see if there's any tips. Maybe post on any forums as well. But I would just try to find other people that are run into this scenario and figure out if it's something where you should unplug the monitor and not use it till it's fixed, or if it's something where you just deal with it until you have time to fix it. But I'm sorry that I'm not able to give you a solid answer, but I guess I would just proceed with at least a little bit of caution. Jordan Chaston wants to know, when using Mister for retro computers, is it possible to connect original disk drives, legacy mice keyboards or joysticks, or mostly MIDI, or most importantly, MIDI boxes? Jordan's noticed there's an option for connecting a cassette tape for tape software, but haven't seen these other options. So I don't know. I think at the moment you might have to look into USB conversion if that's even supported for some of this stuff. But I do think it's important to just remember the use case of the Mister. So the FPGA that's on the DE10 Nano costs much more than that DE10 Nano normally does. And that was just an educational tool that Intel subsidized that allowed people to get it so cheaply. So you got to remember that the Mister is not a product designed from scratch for retro computer and gaming enthusiasts. The Mister is an adaptation of something that's cheaply available, cheaply relatively speaking, of course. So it might not be easy to do that stuff depending on the pins that are available, the setup, the I/O board, and all that stuff. And it might seem weird as well, because you could see some of the pretty amazing stuff people have been making for it, and you think, oh, well, can't you just add a MIDI input as well? I don't know. So the Mister team has their own forum now. I would definitely ask there. And I'd also just like to both express my appreciation to everybody involved on the Mister team, from the devs to the testers and all that stuff, but also just say that I'm looking forward to seeing where this project evolves to, because I'm a nerd. As soon as I'm done with something and I think it's great, I take a look at it and want to do it again to make it better. So it's, I'm not saying there's something wrong with the Mister. I'm just saying there's always room for evolution, and I hope that's one of the things that's tackled, is trying to figure out a way to deal with the inputs that are lacking on the DE10 itself. So I could probably talk for another 20 minutes about this and how excited I am about different stuff, but I think that's a good summary of everything, so I don't waste your time. So yeah, sorry I don't have an answer, but check on the Mister forums and see if anybody's been doing that, but it may or may not even be possible. Alex Shemai had a pretty lengthy question, and I'm going to try to sum it up, and if I mess up, please let me know, and I'll try to do better next week. But the questions were all based around Xbox and widescreen versus square resolution and how to use it, what's the best way to use it. And this is, you said you went down a rabbit hole. This is a whole other rabbit hole I went down with the Dreamcast as well. And there's a few things to just keep in mind. So if something is truly set for 16 by 9, and there's Saturn games that could do it, there's Dreamcast games that could do it, it's as long as it's actually set for 16 by 9 and you're not stretching it. I like to use those modes. I prefer to use the full mode of, the full screen space of my TV. However, you're still taking as much detail as can be jammed in that 4:3 signal. at least in the cases of some of these older games. And when you run it in 16:9 mode, it is truly giving you that aspect ratio, but what it's actually doing is squishing all of that stuff into a 4:3 window, and then you're then stretching it out to 16:9. So I guess if you could imagine pixels on a screen, you know, if you have exactly 640 by 480 pixels of something, and that's now stretched to a widescreen resolution like 720 by 480, it's still that same amount of pixel information that's in there, but stretched out. Whereas if you have a true 4:3 image, it's those same pixels in a smaller space, so you could technically fit more detail into that. It's a horrible explanation, but it's the best I can off the top of my head without spending an hour trying to explain it. And then, you know, check out the Dreamcast video on that one. I think the DC HDMI video goes deep into that, but it's my personal opinion. There's no right or wrong answer for this. But if something has a 16:9 mode natively, I'm going to use it just if I'm gaming on a flat screen, or I guess even on a widescreen BVM. Just because I like to appreciate the extra screen space and for a lot of stuff like that. Even if it's games where some modes run in widescreen and some modes run in 4:3, I'm still cool with that, depending on the game. I think there's some where it's like everything is in 16:9 except the actual gameplay and stuff. There's some weird use cases with that. So that's kind of, I guess I wouldn't worry about it as much as things like, you know, true aspect ratio stretching in video capture, stuff like that. I mean, there's different ways to get into it, but if you're just playing a game and enjoying it, my personal opinion, if you're on a flat panel and it has a 16:9 native mode, in most cases I would use it, unless it's just ridiculous and not at all worth it. You had a few other questions. You said there are many games you own on the 480p and widescreen compatibility list for the Xbox. Yet only one of them actually has HDTV 16:9 indicated on the back cover. Why do you think a lot of games didn't indicate this on their cases? Well, remember that when the Xbox was released, I mean, HD TVs were just coming out. I think I may have had one then, but it was still thousands, not hundreds of dollars. I scored a Luva, I think it was a Condo was the first one I got that was selling locally for like $3,000. I think I got it for $1,000 or something like that, maybe a little bit over it. So it's, you know, it wasn't common at all. It was enthusiasts, not your average person. So, you know, I think in many cases, they just didn't want to confuse people. You know, they don't want to put HDTV 16:9 on it and have people think that their TV isn't compatible or something like that. Whereas the opposite, the enthusiast crowd will probably be staying on top of what things were compatible. I think that pretty much answers most of your questions. I mean, if you really want me to elaborate, I could certainly go deeper into it next week, but it gets to a lot of technical stuff that basically ends in, as long as it's native support of 16:9 and not stretching. I mean, that's what I would choose in almost all cases. Bad Reality wants to know if SDI is 240p compatible. No. In fact, SDI and HD SDI are very finicky, and if there are any ways to make 240p or 480p compatible, I've never found it, and I've tried pretty hard, and I've talked to people that bought even the more expensive adapters that you probably wouldn't have wanted to shell out the cash for, and especially because of those lines of A-series BVMs that have the input card, the RGB input card that's extremely expensive. We spent a lot of time trying to get all original consoles working through SDI or HD SDI so that people wouldn't have to spend $2,000 on an input card, and we couldn't figure it out. SDI works with 480i only, and is even pretty finicky with the OSSC if you have any outputting 480i, any console outputting 480i natively. It's really meant for VCRs, DVD, TV signals pretty much. And HD SDI is only for 720p and 1080i, and there's different modes of each, and I don't know if they're backward compatible. I don't think so, but some cards for the BVM support both. So to be honest, like that's not anything I would mess with. However, I have messed with HDMI to HD SDI for 720p signals, and it worked perfect. but I don't think it was any better than using just component video directly. It certainly was better when I did a test a few years ago and we didn't use shielded component video cables. Then once we switched to the HD Retrovisions, I don't think I could see a difference at all on my D32. So let's just say, like, I think it was a Wii U is what we used. So HDMI to HD SDI and then into the BVM versus just direct 720p out of the Wii U directly in with some good cables, and it was pretty much the same. So I personally wouldn't recommend anybody use either of those formats for gaming unless you already own the equipment or unless you have a very specific use case. Otherwise, it's just you're gonna spend a lot of time and money to get the same thing that you could have through regular analog signals. Bad Reality also wants to know if there's any more info regarding the noisy SD card stuff that we've been doing some research on. So the basic overview is that certain devices add noise whenever the SD card is being accessed, but only with certain brand cards. When I first dove into this to try to do some research, I talked to somebody that said they feel what you're actually hearing is the high frequency speed, and if you use a slower card, that would make it go away. There are specific cards that people have tested that have less than others. Maybe speed is a difference, but I'm not really sure how deep everybody went into solving the issue as far as determining the exact reasons why, and it might not even be an issue that's possible to fix. So I guess I don't really want to go any further on this because I'm kind of in the middle of some of my own testing, and I want to try to get to the bottom of this before accidentally spreading any misinformation. And I'm not saying that you did, I'm saying that I don't want to. So I guess just sit tight, and there's one 256 gig Samsung version. I actually think I have it right here. Yeah, Samsung Evo 256. I got this link from Bernie. He said that this one was the one that was quietest to him, so I'll see if I could leave a link below for anybody that wants to try it out. But as far as I know, that's the only firm step they had moving forward is this Samsung, another brand that was quieter, that's not as easy to use, and we'll continue to do research to figure out why and if and how it can be fixed. Rick has a G-SCART switch and so far hasn't had any problems with it, but recently got a SCART cable to hook a Dreamcast up to it. And when they connect the Dreamcast, the entire screen is shades of red and black, like looking at a Virtual Boy. The Dreamcast and the cable work perfectly going directly into the FrameMeister, and all 8 inputs in the G-SCART work fine with other consoles. Any idea what to try? So I've never heard or seen that happen before, so you got a weird one here. There are 2 things that are popping into my mind. First is the Dreamcast cable. Is that one of the switchable ones? And if it is, just try the other mode or make sure it's not stuck between modes or something like that. I would definitely try with 15 kilohertz mode first just to make sure and see what happens. And also, I have seen scenarios where I'll unplug a SCART cable, plug it into one thing, and it works. Unplug it, plug it back into the first thing, and it doesn't work. And the cable is sort of broken, but not quite. I'm not saying that's what it is in your case, but in mine, and a couple times it drove me nuts because I'm like, how come it always works when I plug it over here to the left? And then I took it all apart and I realized that one of the wires had just broken on the inside, but was still kind of like sort of rubbing up against the joint in which it broke on. So it just so happens when it was plugged into the device on my right, the SCART head was twisted in a way that it pushed those wires together. And then when I plugged it into the other thing, it twisted back and disconnected it, or vice versa, whatever it was. But so those are just the 2 things that pop into my head, but that's a weird one. So maybe take apart the SCART head of the cable to see if you could see any shorts or anything like that. But yeah, that's a weird one. Please let me know what you find on that, especially if it's anything super weird. I'm really interested to what's going on with that one. Frank Aguayo has 2 questions. First, they have a BVM 20E1U, awesome monitor, and an Extron crosspoint. They're wondering what level of sync does the crosspoint output, and are they going to need to add a resistor to the sync output of the crosspoint to prevent any damage to the BVM. So if you're talking about the basic setup of you got a bunch of consoles into an Extron crosspoint, outputting RGBS 4 cables into your BVM, 99.9999% sure that is perfect. I own an E1U, and I've read the service manual for the D1U, and they say that it could accept a wide range of voltages, including the TTL level that the crosspoint, that many crosspoints, if not all crosspoints, output. So as far as I know, you should be totally fine in that setup. Maybe check the service manual of the E1U just to double check, but I really think that's a perfectly fine setup. Just to mention though, if you did somehow have a BNC cable with a resistor in it to drop the voltage, that won't hurt anything. You don't need it, but it wouldn't hurt anything. And also if you're going RGB HV somehow, so 5 wires, don't just combine the two sinks into a Y cable and stick that into your BVM. That would send too much voltage in, and that's not a good way to do it. Use at least a passive sync combiner. And your second question is, with so many products in retro gaming, needed a high quality micro USB charger. Do I have any recommendations on where to find brand new, good quality chargers? Well, first you got to remember that a lot of products, like all of the RetroTing products and the Game Boy Advance Consolizer, could just be powered off your TV's USB port. They draw almost no power, and while I wouldn't use like a dollar no-name brand, anything should be okay. Anything that's not just total junk. But for products like the Raspberry Pi or others that you do need a good quality, high-powered charger, I would just get a name brand like Anker or something like that and make sure it's rated for tablets and not just phones. And that should give you enough power for everything that you need to do. So, that's, Amazon, you could find pretty good deals on it. I just got like a brand new Anker one that charges USB-C devices as well for $10 or something. So, although I don't use it that often, you're right, it is good to know I'm using a name brand one and not just some dollar one I got from AliExpress. Jason Guffey had a whole bunch of really nice things to say. Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of that. And although they don't really have a technical question, they said maybe you could recommend some beers or a cool new drink you've tried. So thank you again for all the nice words. Very interesting that you would ask that question right now. About a year ago, I met up with Christoph, one of the designers of the DC HDMI and a bunch of other awesome products like the Time Sleuth. I met up with him when he was in New York City, and we hung out for a while, and we ended up at this one place and found a beer called Coast Striker. I'm pretty sure I'm killing the pronunciation, but I ordered it because I basically just said, what's the darkest beer you have? And the server said, this one. And when I got it, Christoph said, this is actually one of the darkest beers you can get, because in Germany, what you're allowed to call beer is very strict. So you have to use a specific amount of ingredients. A lot of the craft beers that we have here in the US have artificial flavoring and stuff like that. You can't really do it. So this is apparently one of the darkest beers you could get that's still 100% considered beer. And I have never been able to find it since that day. And I was flipping through my pictures. I save all my pictures off on a drive because I'm a nerd. I have everything categorized by year. I was looking for something else, like a picture of something to use in a video. And I came across the picture of this that I took when I was drinking it with him because I really liked it. I wanted to remember it. And I thought, let me try one more time to try and find this, because the last time I did a search for it, nobody had it. There was one, because remember, in Manhattan, it's really hard to get good beer. You can get all the liquor and wine you want, but it's really tough to track down a good beer store. It's weird New York liquor laws and stuff like that. So all the places I found with this were pretty far away and none would deliver to the city. But I just did another search and Total Wine and Liquor carries it in New Jersey. And I found one place in the city that carries it. So I got a whole bunch and it was exactly as good as I remembered it. So it wasn't just rose-colored glasses here. This was exactly as awesome as I remembered it. So this is, I'm going to have to wait a little while longer to see if it's still going to be one of my favorites, but I think this is now in my top 5 favorites that I'll be enjoying. So I guess, I would love to do a follow-up on this when I finish the case I bought And I'm going to take my time with this one, not just pound beers for pounded beers. You know, I really want to enjoy these. But yeah, funny you asked that question today of all days, because I just got this beer in and I just had a couple of them, not right now, like over the past day or so. And I really enjoyed it. So once again, thank you very much for all of the awesome things that you said, and hilarious that you wanted that you had a beer question within a few days of me getting a beer I've been trying to hunt down for almost a year. So thank you very much. Thanks to Christoph. Much appreciated. Well, that's it for this time. As always, thank you so much to everybody that participates in these. I really enjoy doing them. And if you're new to all of this, please post any question you have wherever it is that you support. So because of the algorithm, I have to leave comments on YouTube. And while I reply to a ton of comments on other videos, these Q&As are really just a thank you to everybody that supports. And it's really the interaction between all of us. So no disrespect elsewhere, but if you're a supporter, ask any question you have wherever it is that you've supported in the latest post. I covered all of the support services today in this one, so it's a good example of what to look for. And just always pick the latest support post as well. The way these work, I can't really sift through and go back to older posts. I can never really tell which one's been answered or not. So just keep it in the newest ones. And if I miss your question, ask it again. It's never intentional. It's just probably the file got deleted in post or something. So thank you all so much for your support. It's your help that's keeping all this awesome stuff going. And I will see you next week.